Hello and welcome to Dance Falls, a Conversation Place, number 11. I am delighted to be rejoined by choreographer Sioned Huws and reader in architectural theory at the University of Nottingham, Dr. Jonathan Hale. We have already met and started a conversation, and we're really picking up from some of the ideas that came up in the last conversation place, number 10. So on that note, I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Great, right, yes, thank you. Hello, Sioned, again. I thought it would be interesting to pick up a couple of points that we mentioned very briefly in the previous conversation, number 10, particularly about the place that you're living and working in at the moment, the house in Japan, which we can see a little bit of behind you. Because for me as an architect, it was interesting what you were starting to suggest about the way in which traditional dance forms are important for you in your work, that are being reinterpreted in various ways, being re-inhabited in some ways. And as you started to suggest, there's a kind of layering, a richness in a sort of layering of working with some of those, say, traditional forms, traditional patterns of movement and sound and so on. But each time they're reperformed, they're kind of created again, and sort of created anew. And that's as new as making a whole new dance piece, one might argue. The thing for me as an architect was that started to suggest, or it reminded me about qualities that often appear in buildings which have been perhaps redeveloped, repurposed, adapted for some new use, where you find that similar kind of sense of layering, of where you get historical evidence of previous uses still there, but also a kind of accumulation of new patterns of use or new evidence about the way the building has changed over time. Now, maybe we can come back to that a little bit later. I just wanted perhaps to hear a little bit more, if you could say a little bit more about particularly about the house that you're living in right now, and then maybe we can see if that might connect with some of those other ideas.
Yeah. So this house was built by Kano-san, and Kano-san is he's a Keizen carpenter, and architect. So he built this house. The house is located in Kakinaisawa. It's in the Kitakami Mountains of Tohoku. 90% of the landscape here is forest. So it's been built from the wood, from the forest. So Kano-san took 1 year to select which wood he was going to use for building this house. Various kinds, colors, textures. Then it took 1 year to dry all of the wood, and then 1 year for him to build the wood. So I've had the pleasure to meet Kano-san, and I suppose the kind of the philosophy in the Keizen house also is that there isn't one nail in the house. So it's all the wood has been either slotted together or based on balance. So there's no nails and no glue. So I think even the feeling of living in a house like this gives you more sense of balance and more sense of breathing. And also, no door in the house is pulled or pushed. All movement it slides.
Right.
So as a physical way, that it's always about revealing or opening, or gently closing, but never pushing. and there's not one lock in the house. And I think perhaps there isn't perhaps that's a very Western thing, the thing of locking a door.
Mm-hmm.
But also, there's something very, very soft and gentle about the action of just sliding.
Mm-hmm.
And then but the notion of just not that there's no nail in the house.
Mm-hmm.
That it's kind of based on balance and.
Mm-hmm. What about? I was curious also about the way that the construction works in terms of the details, because you mentioned that about how important the joints are, that they're not fixed with screws or nails. So I'd imagine, from what I know, the little bit I know about Japanese construction, that many of the joints between the pieces of wood are quite elaborate, certainly beautifully crafted, because they have to fit perfectly, tightly, so that the whole thing holds together. But they're also quite elaborate. But I wondered how much of that you can tell from just looking at the house, or from being in the house. How much of that's because there's a kind of story there, and there's a kind of narrative about the way the pieces are put together. Is there much of that which is actually visible in the house, or is that something that you had to kind of to think about, or to work out for yourself, or even to talk to the carpenter about?
No, I think it's visible, but not only visible. I think more so it's felt.
Mm-hmm.
If I actually, because I think the way it's being constructed, but also the beauty here in these mountains and in the pine forest is like yesterday was a rainy day. The fog, the mist and the fog and the movement of the fog and the revealing of the forest and the mountain. And I'm just looking here to where Kano-san, it's kind of a seed design, and the simple lines are the mist. Well, in my mind, they are. So it's kind of just the beauty of how people live in an environment, and they take what that environment gives them, and then they produce that into, it's architecture, but the architecture is also, I don't know, kind of turned into a metaphor at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I'll try and show you what I mean by the joint of, it's actually on the, I don't know if I can only see through this little small screen. I don't know what you're seeing, Jonathan, but I can't really frame it. Can you see there, the lines?
Yes, yeah, sure.
Why can't, perhaps if I go to the other side, it's like, this is, because I think they are actually on this side. I don't know if you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mist. And this is like the seed form here. I don't know if I try and give you more of a. See, I'm not actually sure what you can see, Jonathan.
Yeah, I can see the screens, and I can see the lines that you were pointing out. So there's a suggestion there that's quite a direct reference to the landscape, to a feature of the landscape under certain weather conditions, which I guess the translucent light coming through the screen, that's also suggesting that quality. Yeah. So there's quite a direct, it sounds like there's quite a direct connection between the building and the landscape, metaphorically in terms of those kinds of motifs, but also literally in the way that the screens open up. So presumably the outside walls open up in the same way, is that right? So when you go outside, you also go out through a sliding screen.
Yes, because if I still don't know what you can see. If you go throughout the back wall.
Ah.
Well, I don't know how much, because that takes you to the outside.
Right. Okay.
But I don't. So if you're, because there's not so much to see on the outside at the moment.
No.
It's dark.
Yeah, we'd have to come back in the daylight for that one.
Yeah, I don't know what you can see, Hale. Yeah, so it does. It opens. Each wall opens.
Mm-hmm.
Like in this room. So, you know, we opened one. We opened that one.
Yeah.
One there.
And there's a kind of layer of space between the main room and the outside. There's a kind of thin layer of space that runs around the outside plan. Yeah.
Every wall actually opens.
Yeah.
Then you have that one that opens.
Mm.
I don't know what you can see, Jonathan.
Yeah. No, I can see a detail there. That's interesting. Yeah.
Then also this one opens as well.
Yeah.
So each of the 4 walls open.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating because it's very much like well, quite literally a kind of performance one can imagine. I mean, if you were living in a place on your own, maybe you wouldn't be as aware of this, but a space that you were sharing with people, or even having a gathering, if you invite people into a space like this, you have a real sense of an event. You know, each time you move from one room to the next, there's a kind of performance going on in almost. It feels like you're kind of reconfiguring the spaces. You're not just opening a door to go from one room to another room. Each time you slide the screens back, you have a sense that the whole space has become kind of reconfigured to suit whatever the next moment in the event might be. So it does have a very theatrical quality to it. That's always been my sense. I mean, I've only been to Japan a couple of times and not for very long. So I only have a vague sense, really, what this spaces are like to inhabit. But I can see exactly what the kind of connection that you must have with the space.
Well, they're very social. It's very social.
Mm.
It's actually after the performance on Saturday with everybody. We had a party here, so we had a long. Just put all the tables together through these 2 rooms, and many children here as well. So it really animates the movement in the house. So there's something very, very soft about how you can move through from one space to another. I don't know, it's very social. It's very 3-dimensional. Whereas I think perhaps in the West we're much more 2-dimensional or flat in some sense. Because there's a sense here that you're always walking through space, or there's a real consciousness of the 3-dimensionality of the body, but of space also, and what it is to cross a threshold, and what it is to welcome into a room or a space, or I don't know, quite amazing.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy that sense of the space beyond, which in some ways was encapsulated in the moment that you just opened the screen behind you, because before we had a very flat, it felt like a very flat background behind you on the screen when we started the conversation. It felt now like you're in a completely different building almost. You're in a different world, because previously we just had the screen closed, and as soon as you slid the doors aside, suddenly this sense of a kind of infinity beyond almost just opened up. And of course it's only into a cupboard. You know, there's a sort of irony in the fact that it's, you know, it's just kind of wardrobe cupboard in a way, but there's a real sense there of opening to, and it's partly because the lighting is lower, and there's a sort of shadowy quality to that space. But I think you get that in all the spaces, that there's a sense of a space beyond, so that you're not confined, you're not in a box in a way, even though the geometry of the space is quite strict. You know, it's quite formal, rectangular geometry. But it reminded me of a book by which you may know, by Tanizaki, called In Praise of Shadows, which I read maybe 20-25 years ago, and I often refer my students to, just in relation to the quality of a kind of historical quality, or a kind of personal quality, to places which have accumulated over time, have accumulated some of those traces of having been, well, made in a certain way. So something about the story of construction, but also been used and, you know, been inhabited in a certain way. And it's often the spaces that are good at one are also good at the other. You know, if they're good at retaining the traces of the construction process, they're often also very good at accumulating the traces of occupation and inhabitation. And that tends to give buildings a real sense of not just history, but it's kind of personality in a way. You know, a sense of that they've been inhabited, they were made by a particular person, and they've been inhabited by particular people. So they have a kind of uniqueness about them, which I guess,
comes back to the conversation I was having with Sarah just earlier when we were having a little break about the what I'm also doing with these dances is like almost revealing all its layers, and when you take it down to its basic, you know, we were talking about foundations, so like the foundation of a dance, and then the layers and personality, in the same way that you're talking about architecture. You know, how do we keep on revealing things all the time, instead of thinking only about advancing forwards? But if you also look back, but open the door on something, it gives you another view of it, or another, which totally gives another perspective on something that you might think you already know, but in fact we don't at all, because we don't give it the time or the patience to actually know a personality. Because to know somebody's personality, you have to spend time also with that person, or with that architecture. So
on that note,
I think
I'd just like to say thank you for letting us spend some time with you both, and helping us really to reveal some of the ideas around body and space and place. And yet again, a very stimulating conversation, and lots of ideas, and also some reading to point us to, which is fantastic. So Sioned and Jonathan, thank you very much again for joining us at A Conversation Place.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.